Nazarene is a title applied to Jesus, who, according to the New Testament, grew up in Nazareth, a town in Galilee, now in northern Israel. The word is used to translate two related terms that appear in the Greek New Testament, Nazarēnos and Nazōraios. The phrase is traditionally rendered as Jesus of Nazareth, can also be translated as Jesus the Nazarene or Jesus the Nazorean, and the title Nazarene may have a religious significance instead of denoting a place of origin. Both Nazarene and Nazorean are irregular in Greek, and the additional vowel in Nazorean complicates any derivation from Nazareth. The Gospel of Matthew explains that the title Nazarene is derived from the prophecy, "He will be called a Nazorean," but this has no obvious Old Testament source. Some scholars argue that it refers to a passage in the book of Isaiah, with Nazarene, a Greek reading of the Hebrew Netser, understood as a messianic title. Others point to a passage in the book of Judges which refers to Samson as a Nazarite, a word that is just one letter off from Nazarene in Greek. The Greek New Testament uses Nazarene 6 times, while Nazorean is used 13 times. In the book of Acts, Nazorean is used to refer to a follower of Jesus, i.e. a Christian, rather than an inhabitant of a town. Nazarene is the modern Hebrew word for Christians and one of two words commonly used to mean Christian in Syriac and Arabic. Etymology: Nazarene is anglicized from Greek Nazarenos, a word applied to Jesus in the New Testament. Several Hebrew words have been suggested as roots. Nazareth. The traditional view is that this word is derived from the Hebrew word for Nazareth that was used in ancient times. Nazareth, in turn, may be derived from either nazar, meaning to watch, or from netser, meaning branch. The common Greek structure is O Nazaraios, Jesus the Nazarene of Nazareth, is traditionally considered as one of several geographical names in the New Testament, such as Lucios o Kyrenios, Lucius the Cyrenian, Lucius of Cyrene, Trophimus o Ephesios, Maria Magdalene, Saulos Tarsius, or many classical examples such as Athenagoras the Athenian. The Greek phrase, usually translated as Jesus of Nazareth, can be compared with 3 other places in the New Testament where the construction of Nazareth is used: how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Ghost and with power, who went about doing good, and healing all that were oppressed of the devil, for God was with him. Acts chapter 10 verse 38 KJV 16:11. Jesus is also referred to as from Nazareth of Galilee, and the crowd said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." Matthew chapter 21 verse 11. Similar is found in John chapter 1 verses 45 to 46. Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, "We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus, the son of Joseph, he from Nazareth." And Nathanael said unto him, "Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth?" Philip saith unto him, "Come and see." Some consider Jesus the Nazarene more common in the Greek. The name of Nazareth is not used of anyone else, and outside the New Testament there is no reference to Nazareth. Nazareth and Nazarene are complementary only in Greek, where they possess the z or voiced alveolar fricative. In Semitic languages, Nazarene and its cognates Nazareth, Nazara, and Nazorean, Nazarean possess the voiceless alveolar fricative corresponding to the s or ts sound. Voiced and voiceless sounds follow separate linguistic pathways. The Greek forms referring to Nazareth should therefore be Nazarene, Nazōraios, and Nazareth. The additional vowel in Nazorean makes this variation more difficult to derive, although a weak Aramaic vowel in Nazareth has been suggested as a possible source. Netser, pronounced na-tser, meaning branch, flower, or offshoot. Derived from nazar. Jerome linked Nazarene to a verse in the book of Isaiah, claiming that Nazarene was the Hebrew reading of a word scholars read as Netzer. The text from Isaiah is, "There shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots." Vertzhotermig Gezar Yeshai ve Netzer Mishara Shav Yifre. In ancient Hebrew texts, vowels were not indicated, so a wider variety of readings was possible in Jerome's time. Here branched Nazarene is metaphorically descendant. Eusebius, a 4th-century Christian polemicist, also argued that Isaiah was the source of Nazarene. Quote, "This prophecy by Isaiah was extremely popular in New Testament times and is also referred to in Romans and Revelation. A Nazarite was a person consecrated to God either from birth, such as Samson or Samuel, or for a limited time. Nazarite is only one letter off from Nazorean in Greek. A Nazarite was an Israelite who had taken special vows of dedication to Yahweh whereby he abstained for a specified period of time from using alcohol and grape products, cutting his hair, and approaching corpses. At the end of the period he was required to immerse himself in water. Thus the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist could have been done to fulfill all righteousness at the ending of a Nazarite vow. Following his baptism, the Gospels give no reason to suppose Jesus took another Nazarite vow until the Last Supper. Luke chapter 1 verse 15 describes John the Baptist as a Nazarite from birth. James the Just was described as a Nazarite in Epiphanius of Salamis Panarian 29.4.1. In Acts chapter 21 verses 23 to 26, Paul the Apostle is advised to accompany 4 men having a vow on them to Herod's temple and to purify himself in order that it might appear that you yourself also walk orderly. In Acts chapter 24 verse 5, Paul was accused of being a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Tertullian also cites Lamentations chapter 4 verse 7 as evidence that Christians were predicted to be called Nazarites. Lam 4-7 as another instance where Nazarites is rendered in Greek as nu alpha eta iota rho alpha omicron iota. Ancient usage. The term Nazarene has been referred to in the Jewish Gospels, particularly the Hebrew Gospel, the Gospel of the Nazarenes, and the Gospel of Matthew. It is also referred to in the Gospel of Mark. Matthew consistently uses the variant Nazorean. A link between Nazarene and Nazareth is found in Matthew. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazorean. The passage presents difficulties. No prophecy such as, "he shall be called a Nazorean," is known in Jewish scripture, and Nazorean is a new term, appearing here for the first time in association with Nazareth and, indeed, for the first time anywhere. Matthew's prophecy is often linked to Isaiah's. Although only Isaiah's prophecy gives branch as Netzer, there are 4 other messianic prophecies where the word for branch is given as Tzd. Matthew's phrase spoken through the prophets may suggest that these passages are being referred to collectively. In contrast, the phrase through the prophet, used a few verses above the Nazarean prophecy, refers to a specific Old Testament passage. An alternative view suggests that a passage in the book of Judges which refers to Samson as a Nazarite is the source for Matthew's prophecy. Nazarite is only one letter off from Nazorean in Greek, but the characterization of Jesus in the New Testament is not that of a typical Nazarite, and it is doubtful that Matthew intended a comparison between Jesus and the amoral Samson. Mark, the Gospel of Mark, considered the oldest gospel, consistently uses Nazarene, while scripture written later generally uses Nazorean. Quote, This suggests that the form more closely tied to Nazareth came first. Another possibility is that Mark used this form because the more explicitly messianic form was still controversial when he was writing. Before he was baptized, Mark refers to Jesus as from Nazareth of Galilee, whereas afterwards he is the Nazarene. In a similar fashion, 2nd century messianic claimant Simon Bar Kokhba changed his name from Simon Bar Kokhba to add a reference to the star prophecy. Patristic works. After Tertullus, the second reference to Nazarenes comes from Tertullian, the third reference from Eusebius, then extensive references in Epiphanius of Salamis and Jerome. Epiphanius additionally is the first and only source to write of another group with a similar name, the Nazarenes of Gilead and Bashan in Transjordan. Epiphanius clearly distinguishes this group from the Christian Nazarenes as a separate and different pre-Christian Jewish sect. Epiphanius's explanation is dismissed as a confusion by some scholars, or a misidentification. Other scholars have seen some truth in Epiphanius's explanation and variously identified such a group with the Mandaeans, Samaritans, or Rechabites. Gnostic Works. The Gospel of Philip, a 3rd century Gnostic work, claims that the word Nazarene signifies the truth. Jesus is a hidden name, Christ is a revealed name. For this reason, Jesus is not particular to any language, rather he is always called by the name Jesus. While as for Christ, in Syriac it is Messiah, in Greek it is Christ. Certainly all the others have it according to their own language. The Nazarene is he who reveals what is hidden. Christ has everything in himself, whether man, or angel, or mystery, and the Father. The apostles who were before us had these names for him: Jesus, the Nazorean, Messiah, that is, Jesus, the Nazorean, the Christ. The last name is Christ, the first is Jesus, that in the middle is the Nazarene. Messiah has two meanings, both the Christ and the measured. Jesus in Hebrew is the redemption. Nazareth, the truth. The Nazarene, then, the truth. Christ has been measured. The Nazarene and Jesus are they who have been measured. Historicity. Although the historian Flavius Josephus mentions 45 towns in Galilee, he never mentions Nazareth. But Josephus also writes that Galilee had 219 villages in all, so it is clear that most village names have gone unrecorded in surviving literature. Nazareth was overshadowed by nearby Jaffa in his time, so Josephus might not have thought of it as a separate town. The earliest known reference to Nazareth outside the New Testament and as a contemporary town is by Julius Africanus, who wrote around AD 200. Writers who question the association of Nazareth with the life of Jesus suggest that Nazorean was originally a religious title and was later reinterpreted as referring to a town. Variants. The numbers in parenthesis are from Strong's Concordance. Nazarene, Nazarene, Mark chapter 1 verse 24, Luke chapter 4 verse 34. Nazarenon, Mark chapter 16 verse 6. Nazarenos, Mark chapter 10 verse 47. Nazareno, Mark chapter 14 verse 67. Luke chapter 24 verse 19. Nazorian, Nazōraios, Matthew chapter 2 verse 23, Luke chapter 18 verse 37, John chapter 19 verse 19, Acts chapter 6 verse 14, Acts chapter 22 verse 8, Nazariah, Matthew chapter 26 verse 71, Acts chapter 3 verse 6, Acts chapter 4 verse 10, Acts chapter 26 verse 9. Nazarian, Acts chapter 24 verse 5, Nazarian, John chapter 18 verse 5, John chapter 18 verse 7, Acts chapter 2 verse 22. Nazareth, Nazareth. Matthew chapter 21 verse 11, Luke chapter 1 verse 26, Luke chapter 2 verse 4, Luke chapter 2 verse 39, Luke chapter 2 verse 51, Acts chapter 10 verse 38, Nazareth. Matthew chapter 4 verse 13, Luke chapter 4 verse 16. Nazareth. Mark chapter 1 verse 9, Matthew chapter 2 verse 23, John chapter 1 verse 45, John chapter 1 verse 46. Nazarenes, a term for the early Christians. The first confirmed use of Nazarenes occurs from Tertullus before Antonius Felix, one such as Tertullus, who did not acknowledge Asorho Nazaraios as Asorho Christos, would not call Paul's sect Christianoi, Nazarenes, for Christians in Greek. In Acts, Paul of Tarsus is called a ringleader of the sect of the Nazareans, thus identifying Nazorean with Christian. Although both Christianios and Nazarenes appear to have been current in the 1st century, and both are recorded in the New Testament, the Gentile name Christian appears to have won out against Nazarene in usage among Christians themselves after the 1st century. Around 331 Eusebius records that from the name Nazareth Christ was called a Nazarean, and that in earlier centuries Christians were once called Nazarenes. Tertullian records that, for this reason, the Jews call us Nazarenes. The first mention of the term Nazarenes is that of Tertullus in the first accusation of Paul, though Herod Agrippa II uses the term Christians, which had been first used in Antioch, and is acknowledged in 1 Peter. Later Tertullian, Jerome, Origen and Eusebius note that the Jews call Christians Nazarenes. Quote, "The Christ of the Creator had to be called a Nazarene according to prophecy, whence the Jews also designate us, on that very account, Nazarenes after him." Tertullian, against Marcion 4.8. Nazarenes, or Nazarenes, for Christians in Aramaic and Syriac. The Aramaic and Syriac word for Christians used by Christians themselves is Christian, as found in the following verse from the Peshitta, Acts chapter 11 verse 26b. Transcription: Minnesota Hayden QDMYTTQRYWBNTYWKYTLMYD Christian. Translation: The disciples were first called Christians at Antioch likewise, but if as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but glorify God in this name. And early Syriac church texts. However, in the statement of Tertullus in Acts chapter 24 verse 5, Nazarenes, and in Jesus of Nazareth, are both Nazarah in Syrian Aramaic, while Nazarite is used for Nazareth. This usage may explain transmission of the name Nazarean as the name of the Mandaeans leaving Jerusalem for Iraq in the Haran Gawaita of the Mandaeans. St. Thomas Christians, an ancient community of Jewish Christians in India who trace their origins to evangelistic activity of Thomas the Apostle in the 1st century, are known by the name Nazarenes even today. Nazarenes, as Christians in Arabic literature. Although Arab Christians referred to themselves as Masihi, the term Nazarene was adopted into the Arabic language as singular Nazrani and plural Nasara to refer to Christians in general. The term Nasara is used many times in the Quran when referring to them. For example, Surat al-Baqarah says, 2-113. The Jews say the Nazarenes are not on anything, and the Nazarenes say it is the Jews who are not on anything. Yet they both read the book, and those who do not know say like the saying, Allah will judge between them the disputes on the day of resurrection. Nazarenes as Christians in Hebrew literature. In Rabbinic and contemporary Israeli modern Hebrews, the term Nazarene, or singular Nazari, is the general official term for Christians and Christian, although many Christians prefer Mashiach, Messianics, as found in most Hebrew New Testament translations and used to translate the Greek Christianoi in many translations of the New Testament into Hebrew, and by some churches. Nazarene and Nazoreans. In the Talmud, the first Hebrew language mentions of Nazri and Nazarene are in manuscripts of the Babylonian Talmud. These mentions are not found in the Jerusalem Talmud. Nazarene are not mentioned in older printed editions of the Talmud due to Christian censorship of Jewish presses. Nazarene are clearly mentioned in Avodah Zarah 6a, Ta'aret 27b, and may be reconstructed in other texts such as Gittin 57a. Avodah Zarah 6a. The Nazarene day, according to the words of Ishmael, is forbidden forever. Ta'aret on fasting 27b. Why did they not fast on the day after the Sabbath? Rabbi Yohanan said, because of the Nazarene. Samuel Klein proposed that the passage in Gittin 57a, which is one of the most controversial possible references to Jesus in the Talmud, may also have included reference to Yeshua ha-Nazri, warning his followers, the Nazarene, of his and the fate. An additional possible reference in the Tosefta, where the texts may have originally read Nazarene rather than Mitzrayim, is they said, he went to hear him from Kfar Saknia of the Egyptians to the west, where a medical aid from a certain Jacob, or James, is avoided. There are no Tannaitic references to Nazarene, and few from the Amoraic period. References by Tanaim and Amoran to Minim are much more common, leading some, such as R. Travers Herford, to conclude that Minim in Talmud and Midrash generally refers to Jewish Christians. Yeshua ha-Nazri. The references to Nazarene in the Babylonian Talmud are related to the meaning and person of Yeshua ha-Nazri in the Talmud and Tosefta. This includes passages in the Babylonian Talmud such as Sanhedrin 107b, which states, Jesus the Nazarene practiced magic and led Israel astray. Though scholars such as Bach consider the historicity of the event described as questionable, the Jerusalem Talmud contains other coded references to Jesus such as Jesus ben Pantera, while the references using the term Nazri are restricted to the Babylon Talmud. Curse on the Heretics. Two fragments of the Birkat HaMinimim copies of the Amidah found in the Cairo Geniza include Nazarene in the malediction against Minim. Robert Herford concluded that Minim in the Talmud and Midrash generally refers to Jewish Christians. Toledo Yeshu. The early medieval rabbinical text Toledoth Yeshu is a polemical account of the origins of Christianity which connects the Nazarene to the Netzarim of Samaria. The Toledo Yeshu identifies the leader of the Nazarene during the reign of Alexander Jannaeus as a rebellious student mentioned in the Bara'itas as Yeshua ha-Nazri. This is generally seen as a continuation of references to Jesus in the Talmud, although the identification has been contested, as Yeshua ha-Nazri is depicted as living circa 100 BCE. According to the Toledo Yeshu, the Nazarene flourished during the reign of the Hasmonean Queen Alexandra and Salome among Hellenized supporters of Rome in Judea. Nazarenes. For Christians in late medieval and Renaissance Hebrew literature, the term Nazarene continued to be used of Christians in the medieval period, as Crescas, one of the most influential Jewish philosophers in the last years of Muslim rule in Spain, wrote a refutation of Christian principles in Catalan which survives as Sefer Bittul I Kare ha-Nazarene. Modern Hebrew usage. As said above, in modern Hebrew the word Nazarene is the standard word for Christians, but Mashiach is used by many Christians of themselves, as in the BFBS New Testament of Franz Delitzsch, 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 16. Yet if any suffer as Mashiach, let them not be ashamed, but let them glorify God in that name. Quote, in the Hebrew New Testament, Tertullus' use of Nazarenes is translated Nazarene, and Jesus of Nazareth is translated Yeshua Nazari. Possible relation to other groups. Pliny and the Nazarene. Pliny the Elder mentioned a people called the Nazarene in his Historia Naturalis. Bernard de Burgh connects Pliny's Nazarene with early Christians, and de Burgh dates Pliny's source between 30 and 20 BCE and, accounting for the lapse of time required for the installation in Syria of a sect born in Israel, Judea, suggests the presence of a Nazarean current around 50 BCE. Pliny the Elder indicates that the Nazarene lived not far from Apamea in Syria in a city called Bambyx, Hierapolis or Mabog. However, it is generally thought that this people has no connection to either Tertullus's description of Paul, nor to the later 4th century Nazarenes. Pritz, following Du Sord, P. connects Pliny's 1st century BCE Nazarene to the 9th century CE Nazarenes, Nazarenes, and Fr. News Nazaraioi. The testimonies of Epiphanius Philostrius and Pseudo-Tertullian may all draw in part from the same lost anti-heretical works of Hippolytus of Rome, mentioned as the Syntagma by Photius, and Against All Heresies by Origen and Jerome. Epiphanius uses the spelling Nazaraioi, which he attempts to distinguish from the spelling Nazaraios in parts of the New Testament, as a Jewish Christian sect. According to the testimony of Epiphanius against the 4th century Nazarenes, he reports them as having pre-Christian origins. He writes, quote, they did not call themselves Nazareans either. The Nazarene sect was before Christ, and did not know Christ. 6:2 But besides, as I indicated, everyone called the Christians Nazareans. The sect was apparently centered in the areas of Syria, Galilee and Samaria, essentially corresponding to the long-defunct kingdom of Israel. According to Epiphanius, they rejected temple sacrifice and the law of Moses, but adhered to other Jewish practices. They are described as being vegetarian. According to him, they were Jews only by nationality who lived in Gilead, Bashan, and the Transjordan. They revered Moses but, unlike the pro-Torah Nazareans, believed he had received different laws from those accredited to him. Epiphanius's testimony was accepted as accurate by some 19th-century scholars, including Wilhelm Bousset, Richard Reitzenstein and Bultmann. However, Epiphanius' testimony in this regard, which is second-hand, is in modern scholarship read with more awareness of his polemical objectives to show that the 4th century Nazarenes and Ebionites were not Christian. Mandaeans. The Mandaeans of Iraq used the term Nazorean in the history, the Harangue that to describe their origins in and migration from Jerusalem, and 60,000 Nazareans abandoned the sign of the seven and entered the Median Hills, a place where we were free from domination by all other races. Theories on the origins of the Mandaeans have varied widely. During the 19th century, Wilhelm Bousset, Richard Reitzenstein and Rudolf Bultmann argued that the Mandaeans were pre-Christian. As a parallel of Bultmann's theory that Gnosticism predated the Gospel of John, Hans Lietzmann countered with the argument that all extant texts could be explained by a 7th century exposure to and conversion to an Oriental form of Christianity, taking on such Christian rituals Mass as a Sunday Sabbath. Scholars of Mandaeans considered them to be of pre-Christian origin. However, no evidence for this is found prior to the 2nd century. They claim John the Baptist as a member of the sect. The River Jordan is a central feature of their doctrine of baptism. However, in the 1960s the position of scholars of Mandaeism settled on an early Jerusalem, but not pre-Christian, origin.